Hey guys, it's Tanner with Built Not Bought. Today we're going to build these awesome walnut end tables that we have in our master bedroom. I hope you enjoy the build. We're going to jump right into things here. I'm getting my table saw set up to rip down all of this 4/4 walnut. So I kind of get it to a rough size that I want it to be with my table saw, and then I take it over to my jointer shortly after this to face joint everything. This is kind of my typical workflow to get everything to the same width and then take it over to my jointer. It might be a little different than other people. Now that I have everything to the same width, I'm going to run over to my Grizzly planer. This is a parallelogram type planer that I picked up a couple of years ago, and I absolutely love it. I take off about a 16th. Sometimes I go up to an 1/8 of an inch per pass, depending on what the lumber looks like. But in this case, the lumber was relatively flat to begin with, so I just set my jointer at a 16th of an inch and run the entire face through. Once I have a flat face, I use that flattened face and put it up against the fence of my jointer and get a edge at a perfect 90-degree angle, which you didn't see me do here. And then I set up my thickness planer, which is also from Grizzly, not sponsored, but this one is a tank and does a great job as well. They both have the helical cutter heads on them, which work great to give you a nice, smooth finish right out of the gates. Now that everything's flat and square, I'm ready to start my glue up process. In this case, I'm going to punch in a few dominoes with my Festool domino. This is the 500, which is the smaller version, but I use it all the time and it works great. These dominoes are going to help keep everything flat and my alignment on track for the glue up. I do want to mention that they are entirely unnecessary. You can do panel glue ups without dominoes. They just make everything go a little bit quicker and easier. And I stress out over glue ups already, so that's why I use them all the time. Just makes things go a little bit more smoothly. You're also probably wondering why I'm gluing these up in a vertical position on my workbench, and that's because the station that I normally glue stuff up at was already occupied with a different panel. So I decided to put it in my vise clamps and do it vertically. I added a few clamps after this, a few of my Bessie parallel clamps. And to be honest, I kind of like doing glue ups in this vertical direction. It makes glue up a little bit easier, and when you get it up high like this, it's kind of easier to align everything as well. So fast forward 24 hours, I let that glue set up and cure. Then I ran it through my jet drum sander. This is an older drum sander, and this size panel is about as big of a piece that I would ever do in it, but it did get everything relatively flat. And then it was a matter of making my 45-degree angled cuts because I plan on doing a waterfall edge with these end tables, which if you're not familiar with woodworking, it's just where the grain pattern runs from the top panel over to the side panel and then wraps all the way around, so you get a continuous grain pattern and it looks really clean in the end. I also decided to chamfer the inner edge of these nightstands to give it a little bit of depth so that the drawer kind of sits inset to the actual frame of the cabinet itself. Now that I have my 45s all cut out, I grab my trusty domino again. I set it at a matching 45-degree angle and I punch in 3 or 4 dominoes on each of these 45-degree angles. These dominoes will help strengthen those end-to-end glue-up joints and make alignment a little bit easier during the glue-up process. So while that glue is setting up, I decided to start cutting out some pieces off this scrap wood walnut that I had laying around because I had a cool idea to do some end grain work on the face of the drawer for these cabinets. And after cutting out dozens of those little pieces of end grain, I started to run them all through my drum sander again to get a continuous thickness across the board and to do a quick sanding on them. All right, so we got the outer casing of our cabinet for these nightstands out of the clamps. It's not been cleaned up or sanded in any way, so they're still a little bit grimy, but you can see that continuous grain here on this edge, and that's what I referred to earlier in this video as the waterfall edge. And you'll get a better look at that later on in this. But now it's time to talk about the leg setup for this nightstand. Right away, I was going to place the legs straight flush with the edge of the cabinet, and then I wasn't going to elevate it like you see here, but I added this cross brace to lift those legs up off or to lift the top off of the legs just a little bit. Then I put in those 2 cross stretchers to give it a little bit of support and to give me a place to actually attach the legs to the base. But you'll see here I have a 15-degree miter on the legs themselves, and then I match that on that cross stretcher. And this is kind of the inset that I'm talking about that I prefer over just having it flush with the front. I did a 1 inch inset, so those legs are inside of the box of the cabinet, 1 inch on each side. And initially I was going to have them towards the outer edge of the cabinet like this. But I just think changes in depth and dimension make a piece pop a little bit more. This looks okay, and it probably would have been just fine. But I went with the crazy idea to inset it back about an inch instead of having it flush. And here I'm just going to show you what it would have looked like flush. Let me know in the comments below if you liked it better flush with the front, or if you think I did the right move here and pushed it back a little bit. For some reason, I look at this and it just looks a little bit odd. And I think I'm going to definitely go with having it pushed back a little bit further and lifted up off the legs. So now that I came to that conclusion or decision, I'm going to punch dominoes in all of these pieces and then add some clamping blocks all around to get this thing ready for glue up.
I always keep the offcuts when I cut angled legs, and then I use Starbond CA glue to attach them. This is the accelerator here to the legs like this, and that gives you a straight clamping reference when you put this together. And then you just snap them off with a hammer. If you're interested in Starbond CA glue, you can use my promo code BUILT to save yourself 15%. Here you can see what I was talking about. Got a clamp on the outside, squeezing this tight, and then my clamping block right there to here to squeeze this end tight. I got a nice tight seam.
I run this through my trusty dusty drum sander to flatten everything and speed up the sanding process before I finish it with my Festool ETS orbital sander. I decided to do a 1/4 inch round over on all of the legs just to give it kind of a more modern look and have it flow a little bit better than just the straight blocky squared off legs. I think small touches like this really step furniture up a notch.
So we're square on the sides. We're square across the top brace and on top of that top brace. I did a round over on these legs, and I'm really liking how they look now. Just water popped the top. Got to finish sanding that. I'm doing 80, 120, 150 on the top. I did 80 and 120 on the legs.
All right, now for the fun part. I'm running these little end grain veneers, if you want to call them that, through my drum sander on their side so that they're all the same thickness. And then I set up this little block that I use my CA glue to clamp down, cut everything at a 45-degree angle. And this just allowed me to keep everything consistent. And I'm just using the CA glue to glue all these down so that they can be instantly adhered to the wood in a matter of seconds, and I can just keep working on it versus trying to set this up and let the glue set up overnight before adding new pieces. This just worked a lot quicker.
And here's kind of the first look of the end table. This face obviously is kind of the showcase of this piece, all end grain chevron. I'm going to fill, there's a little gap here I'm going to try and fill, and then put a black handle on that isn't really going to cover any of this. It's just going to be like a little lip on the top here so we don't hide any of that beauty. I'm loving this.
I do want to mention that one of my biggest, I don't know if I'd call it a mistake on this project, was in fact filling in those little gaps with walnut sawdust and glue. I wish I would have just left them alone and not tried to fill them, because when I put the Rubio on, it was a noticeably lighter color than the rest of the walnut, and it made it kind of stand out, where if I would have just left it, I think it would have been fine. The second mistake, and I didn't really get much video of it, was building the drawer itself. I had 1/2 inch plywood on hand, so I just used that. I really wish I would have used 3/4 inch plywood, because over time, I think having the finished veneers on one side and unfinished on the other, and then the drawers themselves being unfinished, caused these to cup a little bit. So I'm going to go back and remake these drawers and attach the face onto a 3/4 inch plywood to be a little more sturdy. My wife Bree came out to help me finish the face of these cabinets, and they look so good. I couldn't be happier with this result. To attach the legs to the base of this cabinet, I'm using some good old-fashioned Z-clips. I use my domino to cut out the mortise for them to sit in, and then I put a couple on each edge, and this allows the top to move over time and prevents any cracking from occurring. Just one screw in each, and they're they're on there pretty darn good. As always, make sure you pre-drill before attaching any screws. And I like to fasten the screws with a hand screwdriver instead of a driver or an electric driver. Gives you a little bit more control, and you don't want to over tighten these and strip everything out.
All right, time to attach this absolutely beautiful drawer front onto the drawer box. I'm using old baseball cards and double-sided carpet tape. I'm going to stick my drawer front on there, slide out the drawer, and then screw it from behind.
And with the drawer front all finished, that's a wrap on this project. Here's a couple cool still shots. Stay tuned to see how they look in our actual bedroom themselves, but I couldn't be more pleased with this end result of these end tables. Thanks guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed the build. We're super happy with how these end tables turned out. If you haven't already, check out the build video of our master bed that I made a while back. That turned out really good as well. And thanks a ton to everybody who subscribed to me. We've had a little bit of an uptick in subscribers lately, and I truly appreciate it. We'll see you on the next build.